So I had been done with pro wrestling since 2003, the winter of 2003 for that matter. And I had moved on to sketch comedy. I moved on to glass blowing. And my future plans moving forward as of 2009 were to go out to LA, to go out to Hollywood. That fall of 2009, I didn't really have much going for me here in the Northeast, and I didn't really see the need to stick around. So I'd been working odd jobs to save up some money. I had a couple grand saved up. And in August of 2009, I was making plans to head to the West Coast to do sketch comedy and improv and acting and the whole big, movie star dream thing. And I got a call from this guy in the picture there, the big rotund black guy. His name was JC McGee. He died in 2013, but local, wrestling pundit. He was a music guy. He was on local radio, and I think he had done some stuff for the Star and Buck Wild Morning Show. And he was just around a lot, and I knew him through Bob. He volunteered for Bob's campaign, Bob Backlund's campaign, and he says, "Hey, you want to come work for the Savoldis?" And I had always known that the Savoldis for a long time, whether it be, Angelo or Mario or Joe or Tommy or, anybody that's in that group that is called Savoldi, that they were kind of a big deal because they were always, their company was a wrestling company, and they were kind of always used as like either somebody coming up, somebody going down, or somebody needing something to do in between. So there was always like somebody high profile on one of their cards, and it had been that way for years, for decades. And, like The Undertaker fought there, and, Bubba Ray Dudley fought there, and, all these up and coming wrestlers going back all the way to the 70s and 80s, and they owned a company called ICCW, which was, on low powered TV stations, but it was enough exposure to where people wanted to work there. So what was left of them in 2009 was Mario and Tommy had a company called NWA on Fire, and they had distribution in Maine, in the state of Maine, and their TV low budget, just basic indie stuff like a Smoky Mountain or maybe even somewhat of an early day of ECW kind of TV, went to the whole state of Maine. And that's not uncommon because, like I said, Smoky Mountain and, a couple other small independent wrestling companies throughout the country had the same type of deal where maybe, after SmackDown, when it was on the WB, a local wrestling group would come on and, 20 people would watch it and ho-hum. So they had one of those deals going on. But the thing with them is they also had international distribution, because with independent wrestling that nobody cares about, small TV stations, and even sometimes not even small TV stations in countries around the world, will purchase your library or purchase like your tapes or purchase your TV episodes for, $500, $1,000 a month or week or whatever, if you send them your weekly TV, right? So the Savoldis had TV in Mexico. They had TV in Egypt. They had TV like in fucking Germany. They had TV in like, South Africa. So it was like, in many ways, you're getting like a global exposure if you work for these fuckers. So like it made sense to go to say yes, I would like to go and work for the Savoldis, because it wasn't just going to work for an independent wrestling company that nobody's going to see the videos and nobody's going to see the TV because they don't have TV and nobody cares, and bullshit in front of 15 people rec center nonsense. It was actually, even if there was 15 people in the crowd at whatever show I was going to do, it was going to be taped for national and international distribution. So that was my motivation for going to work for them. So for whatever reason, the Savoldis that were left, Tommy and Mario was like the head of was like the promoter. So I don't know how this happened, if JC had Backlund call Mario, or if Mario just happened to call Backlund at the same time that JC called me. And they were looking to partner with somebody. So Backlund had done a bunch of stuff with them back in the 80s, and he was close with them because he was one of Vince Sr.'s guys. And in Backlund's mind, that anybody that ever had anything to do with Vincent James McMahon was a fucking saint and could do no wrong, which obviously we all know is not the case. But, in Bob's eyes, that's how he viewed things. So Bob brought in this other guy named Seth Rosenblatt, who, if that name sounds familiar, he produces, he's the money guy for a lot of bargain bin movies that you'll see like at Walmart. So if you ever happen to see the name Seth Rosenblatt on the credits for a bargain bin movie, that's who I'm talking about, is this idiot Money Mark. And Bob brought him in as just that, an idiot Money Mark. And he wanted to help him, finance NWA on Fire. And it was, maybe a little down, business was a little slow or whatever. So Bob offered to, be a booker, and he offered to bring Seth along with Seth's money. And somehow I get tossed in the mix, and I'm going to be a manager again, and maybe do some commentating and all this stuff. But at first, the way Backlund had pitched me to Mario was that I was going to be this, banker from hell, right? Because at the time, 2009, the whole banking crisis, so I was going to be this like Wall Street banker that like was down on his luck and had to go into wrestling because, his customers and the people and the saps, they stopped paying their bills. So now I have to find other work, and I'm here in wrestling trying to find me cash in on a champion. And it was cool. It was funny. I mean, I didn't mind doing it. And I think there's a promo out there somewhere of me doing that in one of the matches that I had where I think it was Max Bauer versus Rick Fuller. And that was the promo that I had cut for NWA on Fire, was introducing myself as this, nutcase, banker, like creep, So, like the day of the show, the first show, and it was in Portland, Maine, and we were coming up from Hartford, and I drove with Seth and two of Seth's friends, and we left my house at noon. So we got to Maine about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is ridiculous because it doesn't take that long to get to Portland. But it was just, fun and games because Seth Rosenblatt is a trust fund baby, right? So it didn't matter to him how long the drive took. It didn't matter how much gas he used. It didn't matter, if we stop at a 4-course, diner, restaurant, whatever, or if we just stop at McDonald's really quick, get on the road, so we can get back on the road or whatever. And it was okay because I was going to work for the Savoldis, and I was really excited about it. So I didn't really care about the little stuff like that. But so we get there, I'm introduced to Mario and Tommy, and they're cool. And they're older now. So at this point, so it was crazy because, Mario was all over the place. He was a referee back in the day for WWF, and before Tim White, he was Andre the Giant's handler, and he had done a bunch of stuff. And his Angelo Savoldi was big, and he worked for his whole family was involved. So it's kind of cool to meet somebody like this, but it just wasn't cool to see a small VFW hall or whatever it was, Armory or whatever. So, I go in, he says, okay, we're going to put you on commentary with Tommy. and JC, and that's where this picture's taken. Is I'm doing commentary with Tommy Savoldi and JC McGee, and I didn't really get a chance to meet any of the guys. I didn't really know anybody's moves or names or anything, so I was kind of winging it, you know. And Tommaso Ciampa was on the card. Elio and Apollo was on the card. Bobby Robinson was on the card. Just guys that I'd kind of like have just kind of known. Uh, Malachi, he's from Chicago. Guys that I kind of like knew, but like didn't really know anything about. So like I'm stressing the whole time and I'm sweating profusely because it's the middle of August. And like, Tommy's kind of like looking at me and I got caught up one time and like Tommy kind of like got frustrated and made fun of me. But like, I didn't care because I was getting my foot in the door with the Savoldis, right? This is international, exposure on some level and national exposure. So like, everything's going good. So, obviously, the whole independent wrestling bullshit. I got paid with a bowl of chili and, went home. And as we're driving home, I'm talking with Seth in the car and he starts asking me questions because he knows that I've already done this shit. And, independent wrestling, it's kind of new. It is new to him. He knows nothing about it, and Backlund knows nothing about it because all Bob ever knows about is, big time wrestling, is WWF and all that stuff. And he has no idea how modern indies work, so he has no idea that secretly, behind closed doors, these guys are being taken for a ride. And a lot of these guys just want to keep the party going and, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And, so I said, this guy's got a tape library that's like goes back like 50 years. Like, I'm sure if he got it appraised by WWF or, anybody that would be interested in buying it, that he could probably get a pretty penny for it. And you guys could all make out like bandits and you could still, run your business and still have a wrestling promotion and all the shit. And I didn't think anything of that. And I just kind of blurted that out. And, and not for nothing, but the TV taping that we had just did, there was like, 45 people in the audience. Like, I mean, we drove all the way up to Maine to work in front of 45 people. And, I don't know who's watching their TV up there, but it doesn't seem like a lot of people. So maybe you might want to tweak the TV a little bit, make it a little bit more interesting or redo the production value of it or have better production value because, ratings kind of matter. And then Backlund was like, well, that's irrelevant. Ratings are irrelevant. I'm like, ratings are irrelevant? What are you, crazy? Well, clearly they're not irrelevant because you only had 40 people in the crowd. So I mean, you're not making any money. So if nobody's watching your TV show, nobody's going to your shows. So apparently, yes, they are relevant, and it was like a whole big thing. So I kind of backed off for a minute and this guy named Wild Bill Ziegler, whatever the fuck, this, carny from Middletown, Connecticut, and he had like a rock nostalgia store, and it wasn't like a high-end rock nostalgia store. It was literally just a room full of crap. And, he did little gimmicks to make himself, feel special and everything. He'd paint his face on the wall and Wild Bill, yay, so none of the stuff was autographed. None of the memorabilia was like official. It was all like bootleg bullshit, right? So he wanted to suck his own dick one day, probably about a month and a half later, and he bought a show from Savoldi. What you do is you buy a show, you set your budget, you say, I want 5 matches on a card for my birthday, and I want to just have a match in the parking lot of my piece of shit dollar store. And Mario gave him a price. He said, okay, he paid him. He had a show in the parking lot of his of his dollar store, of his rock nostalgia shop. And 10 people were in the audience. So right there, the boys were hot because Mario didn't just use Connecticut talent. He used talent from all over the Northeast. And that's from like Maryland to Chicago to, Bangor, Maine. Like he used talent, like the best talent from like all over the Northeast. Even like the Eastern, like seaboard and like east of the Mississippi, like he wouldn't be shy in using calling talent and say, hey, because the trade off was you're on international television. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like, even if you're not getting $1 million to work for the guy, you're going to be all over this guy's TV because he needs the content for all these TV deals he has all over the world. So again, those TV deals, it's not like he's making $1 million off of them, but he doesn't have to because it doesn't matter because all anybody cares about is the distribution and the exposure, and he had it. So they couldn't use anything for this particular wrestling show because nobody was in the audience and it looked like shit. But this is where it gets interesting. This is kind of where it all falls apart. After the show, Seth Rosenblatt walked up to Backlund and walked up to Mario Savoldi and basically laid out everything that I said to Seth about the TV, about his library, about his TV product, and about there being 35 people in the audience up in Maine and needing to really spruce things up a little bit or he wasn't going to invest anymore. And Backlund got all flustered. Oh, you're just being negative. It was like, no, this is like real shit. So Bob, went into a party supply store the day before the show and the parking lot for Wild Bill's birthday party. And he walked up to the owner of the party supply store and said, I will be in a commercial for you, which will be professionally produced by NWA on Fire if you let us use one of your party tents for this wrestling event, this big wrestling event in the parking lot of Wild Bill's fucking nonsense store for his birthday party. So it was like, the guy was like, okay. So he did. And there was never any commercial made. And this guy, the party boy, he, was waiting for this dude to like really come through with this commercial, And then so he called Mario and said, hey, where's my commercial? And Mario said, oh, I never got the footage or anything like that. So, I'll work out a deal with you. We'll work a show at, a video arcade and I'll let you keep some of the profits. So now Mario has ditched Backlund and ditched Seth. And now he's going after this other money mark, the party boy with the party tent. All right. So they have a show, and Party Boy brings in somebody else who's a pizza lady. She owns a Greek pizza restaurant. So Pizza Lady and Party Boy are now in bed with Mario Savoldi as financial backers. Okay? That show kind of goes off the rails because he paid for the show, but he paid for it. Party Boy and Pizza Lady paid for the show at a discounted rate because Mario owed him money for the tent. So he got the show at a discounted rate. Plus, Party Boy and Pizza Girl had their people at the door taking the money for the tickets. So once the show was over, Party Boy and Pizza Girl had their people at the door run out the back door with the entire gate, and then they all left too with the money. So Mario Savoldi's fucked on all ends, right? So I'm like, dude, I'm going to Hollywood. I don't need this crap. I sat out Wild Bill's birthday party. I sat out the Party Boy and Pizza Girl show. And I didn't really need any of this, right? So like there wasn't much talk for a couple weeks until Party Boy and Pizza Girl wanted to promote their own show. And the booker that they used was Elio and Apollo, who you probably don't know who that is if you live in America, but he's kind of big in like the Caribbean and maybe certain parts like Mexico. He's friends with Conan and, he's kind of a bigger Latino star. And he doesn't speak English, so he's never going to make it in America. And he was older and just a lot of things were going wrong with him. Like he had some legal troubles and, just a lot of things were going wrong with him. But he had it in his mind that he was going to be WWF champion someday, WWE champion someday. And, he had no American exposure, real American exposure. He might have done something with Impact or one of those, B shows or whatever, but never anything that was ever going to get him a job with WWF. On top of the fact that he was almost 40 and never spoke English and, clearly used enhancements. So he convinced Party Boy and Pizza Girl to be the booker of a show at the same video arcade. And that's cool. So he used all of his buddies from the Caribbean, and there was a couple local guys and everything. The thing was, he inflated all their paydays. So, like, there was these no-names from the Caribbean and these no-name washouts from, like, Florida Championship Wrestling or Deep South Wrestling or, any of these, like, former developmental guys who weren't worth their weight in gold, who weren't even worth their weight of, like, a shoelace in gold. And, he paid one guy $500 and paid for his flight and, like, his hotel room and, like, his food, but he wasn't paying for it. Pizza Girl and Party Boy were paying for it. So it was kind of a big deal because this guy was ripping him off. And, it was just a mess. It was a joke. There was 25 people in the audience. And, he's really got it in his head that he's going to be like this next developmental, like, superstar, and this little company that they're doing, in the video arcade with Pizza Boy and Pizza Girl is going to be like the next developmental territory for the WWE, and he's going to be the big star of it. And Hugo Sogoyevich or whatever his name is down in Puerto Rico is like telling this guy, is telling Apollo that, like, he had a dream that God said he was going to be like a millionaire within a year in WWE. It's crazy shit, right? And, like, Hugo is a part-time televangelist down in Puerto Rico. So, like, all these Puerto Rican wrestlers, like, all think this guy is, like, the second coming of fucking Christ, right? And he tells them all this bizarre shit, and they believe it. So they'll do whatever they can to get in front of an American audience, even though they're all enhanced, even though none of them can speak fucking English. The only ones that can speak English are the Colognes. And one of them can barely speak English. And it's like, those are the only guys from Puerto Rico besides Savio that they've ever actually really used in WWE, So it was like, it was just such bizarre shit. So, like, I'm on Facebook, like, the day after the show, and Pizza Girl texts me on Facebook and says, "Hey, you want to go to the casino?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, who's going?" She's like, "Just me and you." I'm like, "What?" Like, 'cause I'm not like anything. I was just a manager on the show. Like, I wasn't even like, I wasn't introducing myself to people. I did a little bit and then just kind of left because I didn't really think anything of it. It was just kind of an extra $30 for my savings account, right? So I'm like, okay, sure. And JC, I called JC McGee, who's in on all this mess. I was like, "Hey, how did that chick, how did she even know who I am?" She's like, "Oh, she saw you on the show. She just wants to talk to you about something." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so she picks me up that night and we go to the casino. And I'm kind of like explaining to her, like, wrestling because, like, I knew she kind of got taken for a ride, but I wasn't sure, like, how much she got taken for a ride. And, like, part of me is like, don't like fuck up the boys' payday. But, like, on the other hand, it's like, dude, I couldn't give a flying fuck about pro wrestling or pro wrestlers right now. I mean, this shit burned me really bad in my early 20s and late teens. And I just really couldn't give a shit less. This poor woman and poor fucking Party Boy. I didn't know the extent of how bad they were being taken for a ride by, like, Apollo and the Caribbeans and, a lot of the washouts from the developmental territories in 2010. But I mean, you're talking, they spent like $15,000 on that fucking wrestling show that drew 25 people at a video arcade in South Windsor, Connecticut. And when she finally got around to telling me that, I was like, "Honey, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. You don't owe anybody anything." I was like, that's silly. You don't need to do that. I quit. I quit your company. I don't want anything to do with it. And if I were you, I'd get out of that and just stop because, I mean, $15,000. I mean, you could, that's not even like the budget for like a house show talent pool for like a WWF show, honey. And you're talking 25 people showed up at your show. You don't have to do that. Who told you should do that? Oh, Apollo and this one and that one. Okay, well, I mean, it's your money, but I'm just letting you know I have no skin in this game whatsoever. I'm not going to be a big successful wrestling person someday. I'm just letting you know you're being taken for a ride and you should not do that ever again. And she dropped me off and I just kind of, went home and just kind of like, whatever. And then for like the next 3 days, she wanted to hang out. And then like on the last day, it was me, JC, and her at a steakhouse. And, she just wanted to thank me for like, saving her money and stuff. I go outside and smoke a cigarette. And Jamie texts me and says, "You're a Mormon and you're saving yourself for marriage." I just went, ha ha ha, what? And then like she comes out of the restaurant and he comes out of the restaurant. And like I go to get in the car with him and she, says, "Hey, come ride with me." I'm like, okay. I get in the car. She like peels out of the restaurant parking lot. She's like, "So you've been fucking Bob Backlund's daughter for the last 10 years? I'm like, what? Who the fuck told you that? I was like, did JC just tell you that? I was like, what does that have to do? Well, no, that's not even close to being true. I've only met her one time in my entire life. And not only that, I'm fucking gay. Like, I mean, how do you not know that I'm gay? Like, why would you ever even think that? I mean, lady, you're being taken for a ride. Get your head out of the gutter. You and Party Boy just spent $15,000 on a goddamn independent wrestling show. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Not in a video arcade. Not without a following. I mean, what are you thinking? I kind of just gave her the business and we just kind of just left it at that. And, now that she knew I was gay, she didn't want to hang out every night anymore. So Party Boy didn't get enough and he ran a show a couple weeks later at the same video arcade. And, he had JC McGee as his booker. And it was just an average, independent wrestling show, nothing special. I think maybe 50 people showed up. And it was mainly geared towards little kids. And I got to work on it because I felt more comfortable working for JC and Party Boy than I did for Apollo. But it was just a big mess, and that was my last booking, and I refused to work in wrestling ever again. But it was like I really liked the idea of working for the Savoldis because it was like, how did it go from like, working for the Savoldis and like having a legit gig, 6 nights a week or 6 nights a month, guaranteed booking and guaranteed, $50 a night. And almost, and different pockets of global exposure to like, working in front of 15 people at a video arcade. You know what I mean? But that's like the nature of it. Like if you don't like walk away and like stay away, like it will do that to you. Like you'll do anything to keep the party going. And that's what like Apollo, Elio and Apollo and those guys down in the Caribbean and, and eventually Mario Savoldi himself ended up doing is they just, will find anybody to finance their bullshit and keep the party going because they legitimately think because of whatever reason that they're going to make it in the WWF or WWE or, they're going to be the next this or the next that. And it's not that simple. It's really, really not that simple. And I think the lesson you can learn from this story is if you're going to go into a luxury business, make sure you're already a millionaire. So like it doesn't really matter if you make it or not. And you can afford to do it just for fun. And like you don't get in anybody's way or like, just kind of annoy people like me who are just going to motherfuck you all over the internet if you fuck me over and have a permanent video online with your names. mention all over it. You know what I mean? I don't know. Fuck off.